Mai devreme că e o concentrare simbolică importantă de lideri NATO în România, pentru că mâine la Cogălnicianu, în județul Constanța, vor fi secretarul general NATO, secretarul general adjunct și comandantul forțelor americane din Europa, împreună cu președintele României, Klaus Iohannis, vor participa la o ceremonie de primire a soldaților americani care au venit cu acest detașament de suport, de susținere pentru România, flancul estic NATO în fața amenințărilor Rusiei. Și Cristina Cileacu a stat de vorbă cu un reprezentant al Departamentului de Stat dacă ar exista o agresiune rusă împotriva Ucrainei astăzi sau în zilele următoare. Vrem să ne asigurăm că românii se simt în siguranță în NATO. Declarația a fost făcută în exclusivitate pentru Digi24 de adjunctul secretarului de stat Antony Blinken, în contextul în care soldații americani promiși de președintele Joe Biden au început să vină în România. Un interviu de Cristina Cileacu.
Secretary Karen Donfried, thank you so much for this exclusive interview for Digi24 Romania.
Well, I am delighted to be with you, and the timing is auspicious because we have State Department Counselor Derek Chalet in Romania as we are speaking.
There are a lot of people now in Romania, especially U.S. troops already arriving in Romania, as your President Joe Biden announced, and they are here to help de-escalate the security crisis we are witnessing right now in our region. The question is, are there any permanent plans, U.S. and NATO, in the region to keep this situation under control for a longer period?
Well, thanks so much for the question, and let me put it in the broader context of what's happening today in your region, in the Black Sea region. As you know, for months now, the United States has been deeply concerned about the buildup of Russian forces on Ukraine's border. We then heard about the so-called exercise that started today in Belarus, where we're seeing additional significant numbers of Russian troops moving to Belarus. And then yesterday we saw Russian warships moving into the Black Sea. The United States has consistently said that in response to this buildup, we are pursuing two different paths. One is a path of diplomacy, and we've been very engaged in trying to work with the Russians on a diplomatic off-ramp. The other is a path of deterrence, making clear to Russia that if it continues to escalate, if it did engage in further aggression against Ukraine, it would be faced with massive consequences. And that response package is something the United States has been working on very closely with our European allies and partners. And that is absolutely the case with Romania, both in the NATO context and in the EU context. Additionally, we've been providing security assistance to Ukraine to help Ukraine defend itself. We also have been working in the NATO context to reinforce NATO's eastern and southeastern flank. And that's the context in which the United States has sent these troops to Romania. We're saying we don't know what President Putin will decide, and we very much hope he decides to take the diplomatic path, but we as NATO need to be prepared for any outcome. And if there were Russian aggression against Ukraine today or in the coming days, we want to make sure that Romanians feel secure in the NATO alliance.
But then again, Secretary, Russia is a threat that is going to be in the region even after this present crisis will end at some point. It will end. We all hope this. And we see that, of course, instead of withdrawing from eastern flank, including from Romania, more NATO allies and more Americans are coming. What do you expect Russia to do in this case, confronted with this fact, basically? Is no longer a scenario?
You know, it's an interesting question because what we keep hearing from Russia is it doesn't like NATO coming closer to Russia's border. And what we in NATO have said is, well, according to the NATO-Russia Founding Act, NATO agreed that it would not permanently deploy significant forces on Russia's border, that NATO said it would not deploy nuclear weapons in new member states. But the irony, if Russia were to engage in further military aggression against Ukraine, we have been clear that Russia would see more NATO on its borders. So Russia is taking actions that actually go against exactly the concerns Russia is expressing to us. So I think we just have to be open about that with Russia, and we will act appropriately. But we have a very firm commitment to every NATO ally, and we will continue to stand in solidarity with every NATO member state.
Secretary, Black Sea means security-wise Romania, Bulgaria and Turkey as NATO allies, Ukraine and Georgia as friends of NATO allies, and Russia as an aggressor. Among all these countries, Romania is considered to be, and at least we consider to be, the most pro-American country in the region. What United States expect from us in this region? What is our role? How do you see it from United States?
Romania, for the United States, as you noted, is a NATO ally. So this is a very strong bond between our two countries. Beyond that, Romania is a member of the European Union. And when we think about NATO as a political and military alliance, there are commitments we have in that sphere. And then in terms of its EU membership, we've been working very closely in the EU on a package of sanctions and export controls that we would be ready to deploy immediately if Russia undertakes further aggression against Ukraine. So in both of those contexts, I cannot overstate how deep the cooperation with Romania has been.
The last question is about the broader relationship of America and European Union. We see, and the current crisis is a proof that this relationship only becomes stronger. But we have to look in depth, and we discovered that the eastern flank countries, for instance, want a harder line, a tougher line when it comes to Russia as response, and France and Germany, the engine of European Union, prefer to have different approaches in this relation. On a long term, how this will affect the American-European Union relation?
So there's a famous quote that geography is destiny. And yes, we have 30 NATO members, and all of us bring our own history, experience, geography, politics, culture, economic relationships to the alliance. I think what has struck my boss, Secretary of State Blinken, very much over past months is the incredible cohesion within NATO. So yes, we are 30 sovereign states, but everybody's spine is very strong on standing up to any further Russian aggression against Ukraine. So yes, there are differences, but there is unity on the underlying principles here. And that is the foundational principles that undergird the European security landscape we, United States, Romania, all of our NATO allies have enjoyed since the end of the Cold War. And we are going to continue to support those principles: a state's sovereignty and territorial integrity, a state's sovereign right to determine its own foreign and security policy, which includes choosing the alliance in which it participates. I could go on, but there are a host of principles that unite us in NATO. And I think that has been very inspiring in these past months, that we truly are stronger together. And I do believe this is something powerful that sets us apart from the situation Russia is in, that we have come together and said, We stand united, and we cannot control the decision that President Putin makes. He will make his own decision. But we can be clear that there is an alternative, there is a diplomatic process that we are ready and willing to engage in to try to enhance security in Europe. But if he chooses the path of escalation, we, united as NATO, the U.S. united with the EU, will put in place severe consequences. And that message has been sent by NATO, by the EU, by the G7. And I think it's powerful. And just to underscore, it is Russia playing the role of aggressor here. It is Russia that has built up this tremendous troop presence surrounding Ukraine. So I just want to be clear about those underlying facts.